Hey, Low Five listeners, what up? This is Alex, one half of the Low Five Gaming Brother duo. Now, today's episode is a very special one. It's a little break from the norm, and here's why. The newest level boss in my life, my son Elton, decided to speedrun his arrival. He's here a tad early, and Anna and I couldn't be happier. We're also exhausted. But with all the new dad challenges and joys, I've had to hit pause on some serious gaming for a bit, which means our episode on Sea of Stars is still loading. But I promise we've got something super special planned for that one, and it is on the way. But I wanted to make sure you had something that hit your feeds on the 15th, our publishing date. Now, I've been cooking up something else a little special for Low Five Gaming, and that's our Low Five Compendium. Think of it as special DLC for the podcast, and today you're getting some early access. This episode is all about the thrill of collecting. If you got a shelf full of rare cartridges, or if you're just wondering why someone might, this one's for you. So, whether you're a seasoned collector with tales to tell or a newbie with burning questions, hit me up on Discord or drop an email. Let's deep dive into the collecting world together. Enough pregame chat. I probably got to go change a diaper. So let's roll the episode. Hey, what up, you fucking legend? You should holler at me if you don't want me to swear. But, if you've been listening for a while, that's just, par for the course. But how you doing? How are we fucking doing? Welcome to another Low Five Compendium episode. So happy to have you here. Thank you so much for being a member. This episode is a fun one for me. It is on collecting. I'm going to be spending a little bit of time talking about my collecting journey and give you some tips for if collecting is something that you don't currently do, but if you're collecting curious, I've got some tips for you. And if you are a collector, this might just be some fun, stuff for you to listen to. You might be able to resonate. And if that is the case, I would love to hear about it. Hit me up in the conclave, our special little area in the Discord where we can talk about these compendium episodes. It's definitely been mentioned on our mainline podcast on Low Five Gaming that I am a collector, more so than Luke. I am just super into physical media. I have been really forever. I think there's a lot that goes into that. I think that, I grew up in the 90s. I'm a late 80s baby. And so, my formative years were throughout the 90s. And we had VHS tapes. We had, I think at the time, cassette tapes were really big. My parents had a crazy big cassette collection before cassettes were no longer in vogue. And that moved to CDs. And then my parents had a huge CD collection. And prior, they also had records. So as a kid, I remember, spinning some records at my parents and that was really cool. And that's something that I actually, records have had a huge resurgence. That's no surprise to anybody listening. Before I started collecting games, I had a tryst with vinyl, I guess you could say, that lasted a few years. I've fallen off of buying vinyl regularly, but if I come across a cool record, I'll definitely pick it up. I still love to spin vinyl. I love physical media. I went out of my way to get a CRT TV that can play VHS tapes and that I can hook my retro gaming systems up to play some of these carts that I collect. There's just something about playing games off the cart. I don't know. There's ROMs and we have all these games digitally now on your PC or any of the main, platform systems as well. But there's something that I just love about the actual physical media, like actual carts or CDs, depending on what system you're collecting for. The idea of going to a shelf or wherever you keep your games and sifting through and deciding on which one you're going to play. We do something similar in our digital libraries where you flip through and you take a look, but there's something about being able to touch it with your hands, flip through, and then you select one of the games that you want to play, right? And you're kind of committed to playing that game. I mean, it's not a huge commitment. You can always pop it out of the system at the same time. But, with the way that digital works now, it's so simple to bounce off a game. All you have to do is hit the home button or whatever, and it'll shoot you right out of that game, which I love. I have an Xbox Series X, and it's whatever they call that fucking shit, where you just resume, like it's escaping me right now, but the resume factor that they have is it's really nice. But you don't get that with physical media. But I don't know. There's just something about that physical media that I'll always love it. And it may be just because of the time that I grew up in. I don't know, but it's something that I will continue to relish in, and I'll continue to collect because it's a lot of fun for me. I haven't always been this way though, especially with video games. In fact, it wasn't until about 2018 that I started my collection journey. Now, that's not entirely true in the sense that when I was a kid, and I was buying my 64 games or Sega, most of my purchases were PS2, 64, the PlayStation 3 era. I had a handful of games as well before I sold that system off. But yeah, I do think that that's obviously where this journey started, because that's how we bought games, and it was fun to have a library of games. Now, fast forward again to 2018, I was working 3 jobs. I was working for. So I had to be completely honest, I had a little bit of disposable income. I was working 3 jobs because I was trying to save some coin to buy a ring for my wife, and plus, just fucking make money. You know how it is. We live in a capitalistic society. You got to work to make money. I was trying to make that money, but because I had the 3 jobs, I had a decent income stream, and I think it was like the first time in my life that I had some true disposable income. And I also had time. One of my main job, I did my work, but at the same time, like, I had a lot of free time. So I was able to surf the internet and look around things. And this is also a point in my life when I was starting to play. I had picked up a Nintendo Switch a couple of years prior, so I was starting to game again. There was a few years where I wasn't gaming, just because that happens in life. But I was starting to get back into it, and so I was also just hungry to create, I guess, as well. I'm a bit of a creative, if you haven't figured that out yet. But so I wanted to. Gaming was like an area that made sense for me to create around, right? So I started an Instagram account where I was posting different items in my collection. The account was called NES Obsessed because I pretty much was only playing Nintendo games at the time. I didn't have a gaming PC or other systems anymore. I had the Sega and the PlayStation 2 and 64, and all those things were in storage or wherever I had them. I didn't have them set up. I wasn't that. This is like the retro fire hadn't truly been lit quite yet. But I do think that it was joining that Instagram community of gamers that really like lit the fire around this retro love that I have. Just because other people were like super into it too. So it was like almost this situation where I was like, oh shit, like other people like this shit too. And it turns out like some of the shit's valuable. Like, I don't know, crazy. But in the end, like, it's just really fucking fun, right? Like, gaming is fun. These games are fun. And anyways, yeah. So, I started, scouring eBay for Game Boy games. And that was really the start of my like collecting habits. Was in 2018, I was checking the internet for deals on Game Boy games. And I don't honestly remember like what exactly kicked that off. Maybe I had come across my Game Boy Advance or something, and I think I replayed Metroid Fusion, and I was like, damn, that was fucking fun. Like, I want to play some more of my old games, but I didn't know where they were. So I like, life's life, right? So I just lost some of these things along the way. So I was like, I wanted to recapture maybe some of that nostalgia, some of that childhood, my younger years of gaming. So I wanted to play. After playing Fusion, I was like, shit, like Zero Mission's supposed to be tight. Like, maybe I'll get a hold of that. It doesn't cost too much. So I ended up getting that. And around this same time where I was starting to get a little taste for collecting carts, I came across a magazine called Retro Gamer, which is a really cool joint out of the UK, I believe. But they do a monthly magazine that covers purely retro gaming, and it's done quite well. But they had a feature on the Analog Pocket. So the feature article of that particular, I think it might have been December of 2018. something like that. Maybe it's 2019. But it was all about this thing that was going to be coming out called the Analog Pocket. And the Analog Pocket is it's a Game Boy system. It's not made by Nintendo, but it's made by a company called Analog, and it's FPGA technology. Without getting into the weeds in this episode on FPGA, it essentially just means that this is hardware that is basically built from the ground up. Like they've built this third party has built this system without the help of Nintendo by studying Nintendo's product. And essentially it mimics the actual Nintendo hardware, in this case, the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, etc. Now it has some other cool features to it, but what's cool about this is that it will play those original carts, right? And you're actually playing the carts. Now, it's like a super nerdy thing, and it really, like, when you really boil it down, like, does it fucking matter if you're playing a ROM or a cart? And I don't know, some people will like get into the weeds with you and be like, yeah, it fucking matters. Like, but the only way that it matters is if it matters to you. And for whatever weird lizard brain reason, it does matter to me. Like, I just think it's really cool. And I think it calls back to that whole idea of being able to touch those carts and physically flip through them. And there's almost like a greater connection with these games, right? I think that has something to do with it. But the actual gameplay itself, like if you're playing a ROM on your computer, like you're still playing that game. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that too. But I just really love having that media on a physical cart, the way it was intended to be when it was first made. So I read this article about the Analog Pocket, and I was like, damn, I fucking need this thing. Okay, I didn't need it, but I wanted it pretty bad, right? So I followed, I like followed their announcements and everything, and it was like July of 2020. Yeah, right around there is I think when that thing was like a put on launched or whatever, and I like had alerts set up on my phone and shit, and I bought one. And it didn't come for a fucking year. And that's something, if you like are looking into these now, like they still have it's a really long turnaround for when you get it, but it is so worth it because it plays these carts. But because I had this thing coming on I knew it was going to come, and I was really getting into Game Boy games and I was like, well, I want this Analog Pocket because it's like a really modern way to play these games that I love, these Game Boy games. And I'll have another episode that maybe dives deeper into my love for the Game Boy. There's just not enough time in the day, right? But, in July, I also have an episode that I'm doing at the Pixel Project Radio where myself and Dave Jackson of Tales from the Backlog joined Rick to talk about the Game Boy. So that's a good place, depending on when you listen to this, to maybe jump over and check the Game Boy if I haven't hit the feed with a Game Boy specific episode. But nonetheless, I've been starting to collect these Game Boy games, starting to look into the Game Boys, starting to kind of like trying to recapture like certain, it's one of those things when you start earning disposable income, which like shit. I mean, this doesn't go like bode well for like my money management skills. Like I could be like fucking putting this money into other things, but that's another thing, right? So this physical media, these games, like they hold value. That's another thing that I love. When you put them next to digital, like, yeah, I get it. Like it's so great to have the convenience of digital games where you just, press a button and it's there. They all live in the cloud. Yeah. But here's the deal. Like if I buy a copy of, I don't know, we'll use a Nintendo Switch example. Like if I buy Tears of the Kingdom, digitally, like I can't, okay, no one's going to like end up hating this game. So it's not the best example, but well, what I'm trying to say is that if I buy this game digitally, like I can't fall out of favor with it and decide that it's time for me to sell it, or like I can't even borrow it to anybody. Like it just lives on my Switch and that's where it stays. There's no value. Once you buy it, you have it, but there's no resale value. Now almost all Nintendo Switch games like retain their original value, like close to, like if you start like getting into the whole collecting deal, you'll realize that Nintendo Switch games, they retain value pretty well, the physical ones. So like, let's say I got into a point where I needed to make some cash, like I could sell my collection. So that's like, That's kind of a lizard brain thing, maybe, but it does help justify us collectors and our collecting, I think, because we're like, hey, man, like this shit's fucking worth some money, though, right? So, like, it's okay. It's okay for me to do this. But here's, and there's some truth to that. So there is that element to collecting as well. I mean, there was a time in my life when I was short on rent, so I needed to figure out how to come up with some quick cash, and I sold my GameCube and my childhood GameCube collection and my NES that I had gotten later on. Actually, I had probably gotten the NES in college, but I had a modest collection going for that one. So I guess my collection, like collecting, maybe started a little earlier than I mentioned before. But I sold those because I needed to make rent, right? And that was a bummer. But at the time, I wasn't as into the retro gaming. Like I felt like, well, I needed the money, so it was something I was able to do, right? And then around that time, when I said, when I mentioned that I was working the 3 jobs, I had some disposable income and I was starting to play around with collecting. I actually bought back not my specific GameCube, but I was able to buy that. I was able to buy a GameCube and to buy a handful of games that I really missed from the collection, and I was happy to have that again. And I played it again, but collecting's wild. I actually flipped that and got a 3DS. So because it wasn't, well, we don't have to get into the weeds on the reasons for, but I decided that, I kind of missed out on the 3DS and I wanted to check that out. And I came across a really sweet deal on eBay where I was able to pick up a pretty good 3DS with a solid collection of really good games. And that really launched my love for the 3DS. So unfortunately, I don't have that GameCube anymore again. So that's something I might have to tackle again down the road. But that's what collecting is all about. It's the cycle of life on some of these things. But in addition to that 3DS, and when I was just like collecting, I really got as you've kind of picked up now, like Game Boy was like a big target for me, and I think that probably has something to do with the fact that Game Boy was like one of the original systems that I ever owned as a kid. But now I've got my OG DMG, which is great. I've got my OG Game Boy Advance that I had that I bought when I was in high school. And I've kept, and I picked up in this whole collecting journey, I ended up picking up almost all of the versions of the Game Boy, except for the Game Boy Light. That was my my golden goose, that was my holy grail for a while, and I still would really love one. But the Analog Pocket has kind of filled that void for me a little bit. So it's the urge to get a hold of one of those isn't as heavy as it used to be, and I've actually sold a few of those things because I'm also a strong believer in playing these games. So like I have very few games that are new in box. Like I don't keep things sealed. Like I really enjoy playing these. And that's, that depends on the type of collector you are. Like I understand that there's definitely collectors that are out there truly more honed in on the monetary value of these things. Which I love getting a fresh, minty copy or whatever, but I like to open them, I like to play with them. I think that, if you've seen like, what is it, the Lego movie, Will Ferrell, the dad character, it's like he's got the big old, what is it, like the whole Lego set up down in the basement or whatever, and he doesn't want his kid touching it. That's fucking stupid, like you got to play with these things. They're games. But I don't mean to disrespect anybody that is collecting for the monetary value. Like I think that there's a spot for that too. I mentioned earlier, it's something that helped justify this like, I don't know, hobby / obsession that I, from time to time that I've had. But, if you aren't collecting, I do have a couple tips for, how to beef up your collections if it's something that that you're interested in doing. It's not rocket science. People that have been doing this, I think you could probably figure it out on your own. But, here's some things that I've learned along the way. And that is, I think one thing too is that it's, the collecting thing, there's community to it. There's not only that internet community that I mentioned earlier, that I found on Instagram and Twitter, et cetera, where other folks are doing this type of thing, but you also have the opportunity to visit your local game stores and talk to the folks that are working there, or maybe you run into some other collectors. And I love that aspect of it. Right. And I love, that's one of the things Lo-Fi Gaming is all about, is like bringing people into this community and really celebrating it and enjoying it together. So that's another thing I love about collecting. And that's something that I would advise to you that if you wanted to start your own collecting journey is to visit your local game shops. Now you're not going to get the best deals there, right? The deals are going to be, so I use a website called pricecharting.com, and price charting is a great database that you can keep track of your collection there, which is when you start getting into higher numbers, it's kind of nice to be able to pull that up and be like, oh yeah, I already have that game. I shouldn't be buying another copy of that. But it also like gives you a pretty good idea of what the value of the game is currently. Now, depending on, once you start getting into different collecting communities and whatnot, people have been like price charting stupid. It doesn't show the true value, that they're worth more. Like you got to go to eBay and look at and that's true. Like, I mean, it's just a market. Like it's like a market like anything else. But it gives you a really good litmus of what the value of a certain game is, right? So you can go through there, pricecharting.com, and you can take a look at the different games that have a lot of value. So if you want some home run hitters, if you want some big bang games, you just like select whatever system you're going for, and you can look through their database and try and figure out like what games are going for the most money. And like I think that makes a lot of sense. To an extent, there are, for the reasons that a game might be worth a lot, like, it makes sense that if it wasn't mass produced, like if it's a demand thing, right? But a lot of that's not, just because it's an expensive game doesn't mean it's a great game. And there's a lot of great games out there that are way more affordable. So, I guess this is a long-winded way of me saying that when you go to the game shop, it's like a really cool physical in-person experience that you get, and you can kind of see what's there, and you can decide, oh, like for me anyways, I love going and visiting and then coming across something that maybe is not in my collection and being able to add it. Sometimes it's a great game, sometimes it's like an okay game, but it's a fun experience, right? The other major way that I have gone around, or that I have gone about collecting, is via eBay, Mercari, some of those online auction type websites. And I would suggest to you to just have a short list of the games that maybe you're interested in, and then creating search terms around those games, right? So that when they come through, when someone lists them, you might get pinged that, hey, this game is available. But the thing is like, don't necessarily buy it. There's enough of these going around. You just have a little patience, right? So you don't have to buy this, whatever game that you want just because this copy is available here. You do you. But what I'm saying is you can get a better deal if you kind of are patient and you wait for the right copy to come around and you bid on it and you don't overbid. Because here's the deal. Like if you're collecting, you're probably going to be buying more games than you really need to be. And it starts to add up, right? So, that whole thing I said earlier about these things have value and it kind of justifies collecting them. Well, if you start overpaying for these things, all of a sudden, like the return that you get on this potential value of the game, it goes lower and lower and lower. But needless to say, I think it's a lot of fun you're going to want to hone in on the games that you really want to be in your collection. You might have to pay full price for those or full market price for those. And I think that's totally fine. That's good. And I tell you what, with the way things have been, like it will likely retain its value. So like if you do need to sell it down the line, that's something you can do. Now, something, another pro tip that I have is, especially in the beginning of your collection journey, is finding lots. So like if you go to put your search terms Game Boy lots or, something like that, then the searches that come your way will be or bundle. Like that's another nice term that you can use. So like if you put in bundle, it will most likely show up things where it's like maybe the system itself along with, 5, 10, 15 games. Or if you say lot, then it will maybe offer you anywhere between 2, I guess, and who knows, maybe 100 games. But once you start looking for those lots and you take a look at the pictures and you see what's in there, you start to get an idea of, you can kind of go through and use that site price charting that I mentioned earlier. and get an idea of what the value of each of these games are. And the thing is when you pick up these lots, a lot of the times you're able to get these games for a lower cost than you would if you buy them one by one, right? So it's basically buying in bulk. And then what I did in my collection journey is that's what I did. My collection journey is I would end up buying these games in bulk, but then you end up getting duplicates, right? So then what I did is in turn, I would turn around and sell off the games that I had dupes of. And that made it so that a lot of the times I was picking up, my new games for free, or, my time is worth something. So I guess I had to do that. But it's just a little collector thing and it's fun. And it's just a fun little journey. And, being able to add to your collection and for little to no cost or whatever is always a cool thing. Earlier, I mentioned that I was playing more Switch, right? So I didn't have any of the newer systems other than the Switch. I had picked up the Nintendo Switch, and that kind of reinvigorated my love for gaming. And Nintendo is a brand that, their physical media seems to retain value quite well. And Switch games, even like physical ones, seem to do that as well. And there are a lot, and like because of my love for physical media, I came across different cool publishers like Limited Run Games. There's a few other ones too, Special Reserve Games, etc. And basically, those are publishing houses that are distributors that get the rights to make physical cartridges of games that maybe only had a digital release. And for a while there, that was something I was really interested in. Well, I've kind of fallen off of that a little bit since I've started playing more PC games and Xbox games, and I've started to really like build out my digital libraries as well. Just because you can't have it all. But I still think it's really cool. And if collecting for particular system like the Switch, like those games have good value. They aren't available physically at your Best Buys or your Targets or whatever. So in the long run, there's going to be some value in those games. And like I said earlier, it all really comes back to how you interact with your video games and how what you're into. It might having that physical piece of media might not matter to you, but what I really love about something like Special Reserve is it comes with a special edition card, which is kind of rad. A lot of them have inserts, and I think it really just truly runs me back to a time when physical media was the prominent. That's how things were released, So it's a nostalgic thing for me, I think. I just think it's really cool. It gives you, it's like an extra layer or it's just like a whole extra little wrap around the whole gaming experience, right? I was speaking about buying in lots earlier, and I actually bought this lot for the Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis is one of the systems that I have quite a bit of games for. And I think it was it was definitely on eBay, but I found it was a mystery box, and that's another little pro tip that it can be great or it can be not so great depending. But to do those blind boxes is another term for it. But a mystery box where basically it was like, here's this box full of games, you can bid on this, I'm not going to tell you what's in the box type of thing. And I kind of lucked out. I ended up getting probably 100, I think I have like 84, how many I think there was like 120 games in there, and I bought it, and I went through and I pulled probably 30 of them for my collection, and then I sold the rest for like pretty much what I bought the box for, which is that's the way to do it if you are able to, is you buy these lots and then resale. The only thing is it takes time, so there's that, but it is, in my opinion, a great way to really get that collection going. Once you start to build up the collection, that makes a little less sense, or at least for me anyways, right now, I feel like it makes a little less sense for me to buy these lots just because it becomes extra work. Because at this point with certain things like my Game Boy, like if I were to buy a lot, I would have so many dupes that it just becomes a big hassle to start selling those off. So I'm more honing in on some of my big hitters now. Like, there's not a lot of holes in my Game Boy collection anymore. There's always going to be something, but I basically look at them and I say, okay, if I really want this game, like let's just be patient. Let's put my search terms up on whatever, whether it's Macari or eBay, or if it's just something that, like, if it shows up at the game store, then I'm gonna fucking send it, you know. But if I'm not gonna send it at a game store because it's usually a bit of a premium there, um, then it's something that I want to see if I can't maybe like scoop for a little deal on the eBays. But to give you an idea, and in all collections come in all different sizes, and you should be proud of a collection of 5. You should be proud of a collection of 1,000. Like, just be happy with the games that you have. Like, you know, like I think, like I'm gonna give you a little bit of idea of how many cards I'm rocking with, and I don't do it to boast or whatever. It's just like a fun thing, and especially if you're a collector, it's just, you know, it's kind of cool. But as of right now, I want to say I have a couple hundred Game Boy games. If you include Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, I have roughly 23 3DS games, just under 50 N64 games, about 54 Switch games, 21 Game Gear games, and 78 Sega Genesis games. And you know what? Those rock on my shelf, and I fucking love just looking over at them. Oh man, collecting! I tell you what, if there's any fellow collectors out there, like holler at me, hit that conclave. Like I wanna talk collecting with you. But what does that mean for me in the future? Like there are definitely, I kind of teased the idea that I'm pretty happy with where a lot of my collections are. Obviously, with the Switch as new like proprietary Nintendo game, you know, as Nintendo games come out, I'll definitely continue to buy physical for like Nintendo games, like games published by actually Nintendo. Like I always like getting the physical ones of those. I've gotten to the point with my Genesis collection where there's a couple like Hyperstone Heist for the Turtles. I would love to find a nice deal on that. There's a Castlevania game that goes for a pretty penny that I would love to get my hands on. You know, but I have a lot of the Sega games that I want. There's maybe 3 to 5 like heavy hitters that I'll get eventually. But you know, especially with COVID and everything, a lot of this shit skyrocketed. It's starting to peter down a little bit. So I'll be patient. If I come across them at the shop, I might go for them. But you know, I've definitely hit a point with my Game Boy and my Sega Genesis collection where I'm not as eager to be adding to it these days. I'm happy with where it's at, but I will still sprinkle in some from time to time. I ain't gonna lie. The Nintendo 64 is a system that I have a lot of nostalgia for and love for because that was essentially the first video game system that we brought into my household as a child that was not like a hand-me-down. We ended up getting like a Sega Sega Genesis I have was a hand-me-down. That's dope. Like, don't get me wrong. I love that thing. I still have it. But like the Nintendo 64 was the first new to me system that we ever received. I think I actually got it for my fifth. No. This would have been like my 13th birthday. No. This probably Christmas. I think my parents like halved me on, like they went in on half for Christmas or some shit like that. For me to get the Nintendo 64, but I bought it from Funko Land, so I bought a used one. It's in great shape and shit though. I ain't worried about that, but but yeah. So I say all this to say that there's like I have a special connection with the 64 and some nostalgia for it. And out of all the systems that I collect for, that is the one that I'm like maybe I would go for a complete collection. Now I've run the numbers though, and that's like $5,000 or some bullshit. Mind you, I've got a handful of them to kick me off, so I'm not running out there to do this right now. But I do think if there was a system that I went complete for, it would be the 64. So with that, I think we'll wrap this one up. You know, there's so much more I could say about collecting, and I think I'll do more so in the future. But I wanted to get you thinking about collecting. If you are a collector, I want to hear about your collection. So hit me up in the Discord or whatever way that you feel comfortable reaching out. And yeah, if you think I'm crazy, you can holler at me and tell me that too. Well, shit. Thanks so much for being a member. It really means the world. It makes it so, yeah, you just make this happen. You are honestly making this happen. So that's your membership is beyond appreciated. And with that, until next time, y'all.